looking at those quality characteristics and how we allocate them, comes in saying, how do we make sure we get them all? And how do we make sure we evaluate this right? Is deep thought going to bring in the only way to do this? How do we actually bring in more ideas of people to make sure we get a lot of good collaboration on this? And how do we make sure this is testable? That is, we can make sure that we have a design that we can actually test. Well, one great technique to help all this out is something called QAW, or Quality Attribute Workshop. What the Quality Attribute Workshop does is going to say, you know what, we're going to start off with those scenarios that we had, right? Remember those scenarios we had? Those scenarios were things that we created to help us understand what those quality characteristics really are. From those, we're going to create a bunch of test cases. Those test cases are going to allow us to start saying, given this input, I expect this output, not worrying about the test procedure, the steps, but just saying, given this input, I expect this output. Now we can start changing the scenarios just like we saw earlier on, where we have actual numbers about what's going to be right or wrong. Then we take those test cases and we examine those against whatever designs we have in place. And as we do that examination and then analyze it, we're going to start saying, okay, where do we have to make changes, the modifications here? And we're going to be looking at these sensitivities, trade-offs, and risks. Where is our design kind of iffy that we want to bring in some new ideas that allows us to come up and change this design one more time to even make it better? So QAW is a way to help really drive quality from the very beginning based upon our quality characteristics. Now this is done in a workshop or even a series of meetings. You can even take this up a notch with a thing called an architecture trade-off analysis method. And what that does, it does the same thing but in two formal workshops. The first workshop looks at creating those scenarios. And here we're going to take the business drivers, we're going to look at that, and we're going to then create our qualities tree like we did in an earlier session. And we're going to find out which of those things really stand out. And then from that we can create our test cases. Then we go into a second workshop where we're going to then present those against the architecture with a series of judges. Kind of like, you know, America's Got Talent kind of thing for design, right? And we're going to look at that architecture design, and we're going to look at different approaches during that, and we're going to find the same risks, sensitivities, and trade-offs, which may come us back and say, you know, do we really have these goals? Do they really make sense? And so it's going to be these two formal workshops that really drive this process. But you can see that conceptually it's the same basic thing. We start with those business drivers, go down to the qualities and create our scenarios. For the scenarios, we look at the different kinds of ways of doing that, decisions, approaches, architecture, design. That helps drives our overall risk, sensitivity, and trade-offs. But it really, really comes down to getting and nailing those scenarios. That's what makes this all work.